Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Samuel J. Dixon with Oxford Advisory Group, and we'll be talking about how RMDs change retirement plans. Samuel, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. Happy to be here.
Hey, so before we dive any deeper into RMDs and how they change retirement plans, let's define what is an RMD.
All right, so it's this wonderful gift that you get in your 70s when you're a retiree, where you're forced to pull out some money, right?
Hey.
So you work hard, you put money into retirement accounts, and then Uncle Sam wants his cut, so he forces you to kind of pull it out at a certain percentage each year. And I wrote an article a few years ago. I called it a ticking time bomb in people's retirements. They don't really know that it's counting down, but when it starts going off, it keeps actually going off each year. Okay, so it's not a one-time thing. It's going to continue to affect their entire retirement. And also, if you want to pass money on, it could also affect your kids, their inheritance as well.
Yeah.
So some interesting, a lot to unpack there.
You know, it really is. And I've heard it said that it's kind of like a coyote sitting over a hole for a groundhog, and wait for their head to pop up to grab it, because the government has known your money's been sitting in those those pre-tax accounts for decades, and you just been growing it, and they're sitting there tapping their fingers going, when are we going to get our cut? And these required minimum distributions are those triggers that you have to take out whatever percent at whatever age, and we don't need to get into those weeds, but suffice it to say, what you just said is ticking time bomb makes a whole lot of sense.
Absolutely. I see all the time where people have this idea when they start retirement, like what tax bracket they're going to be in. They're like, hey, you know what? I'm not making all that big salary I used to make with all those income taxes, and it's not, and my bracket's going to be lower. And initially, it usually is. Like we see it all the time. Like most of the time, that bracket's a lot lower and it's manageable. And then they hit their 70s and their bracket jumps, right? And they're confused as to why that bracket jumps. Well, when you're forced to pull that money out, that RMD, when you're forced to pull that out, it counts as income, just like your work, right? And a lot of people don't do the math ahead of time because they're not even aware of them usually, and realize not that you even need the money, they force you to pull it out. It still counts as income whether you spend it or not. You can just put it in your savings account. They don't care. On your tax return, at the end of the year, it goes on top of your Social Security. If you have a pension, it goes on top of that as income as well. And we see this drastic shift where the bracket suddenly is much higher than they thought it would be when they first retired, right? So it's an adjustment.
Yes.
And our mission is to make sure everybody knows about it, right? We want everyone to know about it ahead of time, whether you do something better or not. We at least want you to be aware of it because we see the impact it has on people.
Because when you're aware of it, you can put a plan into place to deal with it. You can't eliminate taxes. You can mitigate and plan for. But to your point, you need to realize that on certain years, it's going to spike you up here, and then your tax bracket is going to be different. So how do we deal with that? Here's a question. What if somebody goes to you, well, hey, we sold our RV last month and we don't need to take any money out because we're good to go. We're flush with cash. Talk a little bit about the R part of the RMD, the required. What happens if you don't take it out?
Yep. So the required is the first word in there for a reason, right? They want you pulling that bad boy out. They want you taking that tax money out of there. And if people miss an RMD, and unfortunately we have people call in sometimes who have missed RMDs, and because no one just told them about it, and then we'll have to educate them on the whole subject, right? There's penalties. Right. And that penalty ranges, 20 to 50%, depending on the person's age, 20 to 50% to 20 to 50. That's quite a large gap there, large percentage. So you don't want to be missing one of those, right? We don't want that extra penalty on top of the misdistribution there. So being aware of them, like you said, we're big on planning, right? It's one thing to have it take you by surprise. That's where you get increased tax liability. That's where you get increased taxes. If you know about it, and you want to work to mitigate it, you need to plan ahead for it, right? What I always kind of like to tell people is quit looking in the rearview mirror when it comes to taxes. We want to look out the windshield. We don't want to look at what you did last year. We want to look at what you're trying to do next year. How do you prevent them from being as high as they were, right? So we call that looking out the windshield versus in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, because if you look in the rear view, there's nothing you can do about it. It's done. It's a
done deal.
bat that you already ran over the little kid's blow up ball and it's already busted. So looking forward, you can have your foot ready to tap the brake. So here's a question, and I always love when I have these conversations to think, and go, ooh, what if? So if we have now established the fact that you've got X number of dollars in one of these non-taxed account, we know that we got to have to pay them with these RMDs. At what point do you want to be talking to a pre-retiree to put a plan into place to go, okay, you've got this X number of dollars. How can we mitigate that as much as possible? So how soon before retirement do you want to have this conversation? And then is there anything that you guys recommend that can help limit and lower the amount in those, non-taxed accounts so that it doesn't spike up as much?
Yeah. So I think the best answer there is, 10 years ago, right? We'd love to talk to them 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But if the real conversation should start, people, I call it retirement red zone. All right. It's 5 years prior to your retirement date that you've selected. All right. So if you want to retire at 65, which we see is very common because of Medicare reasons, then 60 is a perfect age. All right. Anytime 59 and a half and after is usually pretty good because that's when you can actually do things with the money usually. 5 years prior to retirement and 5 years after you retire are paramount. We call it retirement red zone. It's paramount years where we have to get our planning, in our opinion, done correctly to mitigate damages from RMDs, damages from market volatility. That's an important red zone area right there.
Yeah.
But probably the broad answer would be anytime before you start RMDs, right? We've had people come in a year before they start or 6 months before they start. Yeah, obviously I'd like to have them 5 years before that. You can do a little bit better planning. RMDs start and then they progressively, the percentage increases each year that you're in them. So even if somebody's been in them 1 or 2 years, there's still things you can do to mitigate through proper planning, right? And making adjustments on how that account's taxed and what type of account you actually hold it at is huge when it comes to planning.
And I'm confident that there is not one solution for everybody that you cookie cutter and say, here's yours next. So you have to take it into consideration. Okay, well, what is your age and what does retirement look like? And how much money do we have? And what about, and what about, and what about? So let's talk a little bit about some scenarios to help mitigate that. What if you've got that red zone? What if you're like, you're not even at the red zone. You're 10 years before RMDs, 15 years, and people are like, hey, I heard this thing about RMDs, and I want to make sure I'm prepared. I've got $1 million in an IRA or a 401k that's not been taxed. What are some things that you would be talking to that person about to help mitigate those taxes?
Hey, first of all, Mike, if you ever find that one-size-fits-all solution, let me know, buddy. Right, make my job much easier. Right, that'd be wonderful. I'd love that. Right.
Yeah.
I wish that would happen. It's planning from which we call them tax buckets. Right. The tax deferred accounts are the ones which are typically your retirement normal accounts that you get from your employer: 401k, IRA, 403b, 457 TSB, all that beautiful stuff. Right. All those acronyms, that mouthful right there. Those are your ones that we call tax deferred. Okay. The tax deferred accounts feel good when we're putting it in there when we're working because it's coming off our income tax, and a lot of your friends will even tell you to do that. Right. That's the one that is then forced to pull out later with that required distribution and pay tax on it later. So it's not like you're getting around the tax. There's no free lunch. They're going to get you somewhere. Okay. So what we like to say is, all right, if we're aware of that, you can still have money in that account, in that type of account, but let's at least establish something in a tax-free account as well. And let's hedge our bets a little bit here, right? Yeah. Let's say we don't want all of our money to be RMD money. We want something over there. And that can be as simple as, everybody's different, obviously. That can be as simple as a Roth account or something simple in the tax-free bucket. It doesn't have to be complex. Yeah. It doesn't have to be wordy. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be properly planned on how much you should be putting in there, how often, and what percentage of your portfolio should be in there to mitigate. So the solutions can be simple. It's how do we plan them and how do we implement that plan, right?
100%. And just like there's not one plan that fits everybody in every situation. What about people that go, hey, I've heard about converting some of my non-tax IRA 401k into a Roth now. Like, let me trigger a certain chunk of that within reason and put into a Roth so it can grow tax-free. What about that strategy? What are some of the highlights there that people should know about?
We see that strategy all the time. That's a good one. It's a good basic strategy. We like it for a lot of people in different scenarios. The first thing we look at there, well, what's your bracket that you're in now? and how much room do you have left in that bracket? So we call that strategy filling the bracket, right? So if
Yeah.
I'm in the 22% bracket and I got, $40,000 left in room in that bracket, why wouldn't I maybe look at doing a conversion of 40,000 to fill that bracket up? Because it doesn't kick me up. But then let's say, all right, I get kicked up a bracket. Well, then I'm in the 24, right?
Okay.
Well, that's not that high of a jump if we do the math. Now, a couple areas of concern you want to look at if you do that, we call that filling the bracket. You want to be aware of IRMA because when you start converting money, there's something called IRMA, which affects your Medicare. So I do want to caution people there and understand your Medicare premium could potentially change based on your income. Okay. So be aware of that. But yeah, that's a strategy called filling the bracket. We love that. Obviously, you'd want to not jump up into the 32% bracket. You probably want to stay away from that one. So know your math, know how much room you have. And that's stuff we calculate for people all the time and help people with as well is, all right, how much room do you have left in your bracket? What does that look like to move money over there?
And how much time do you have before that retirement red zone in that? Okay, what if you did that, triggered the tax, paid that now, and you put it into that Roth so it can grow tax free? Yay! But I've only got 3 years for it to grow before I need it. Is that enough time? So again, seeing some of those scenarios, like, hey, here's scenario A, B, and C. If we took this much out and hit this bracket, and this much out and hit the next high, what do you feel best with? So at least someone should realize I've got to deal with RMDs. What's the plan? Secondly, would a Roth IRA conversion strategy be beneficial? Let me look at those options. It may not, but at least know that those kinds of things are out there and available.
100%. I think it's just people understanding what are my options, right? Yeah. I think we can all agree there's no shortage of absolute just data and knowledge out there in the world that you can find today, especially on the internet. Google can answer a lot of things for a lot of people, apparently, right? What we always caution people, there is a shortage of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Shortage of knowledge is a shortage of wisdom. It's applying that knowledge, and is it applicable to you in your case? Should you even look at it? Does it even make sense? If you do it, what do you get? What's the benefits? What do I get for doing this? Do I save a whole lot on taxes in the future? Well, let's do the math, right? It's got to make sense for you to want to do it. And it's also got to fit, like you said, within your goals. What are we trying to do by what age? When do I need this money? Those are all components. But I always tell people, you don't know until you dig into it. I can have an idea when we sit down with somebody on what I think I'm going to recommend. And then I start punching the numbers in. We start looking at all the different components, all the different scenarios, and it comes out completely different than we were thinking. We see that all the time. We always tell people we love to measure twice, cut once. We're firm believers in that, right? So you got to know your data, run the reports, run the analytics, do the math. That's what it comes down to. Does it make sense for that person or not? A lot of times the math will be the one to tell you that.
And then if the math works out and everyone feels comfortable and you put whatever plan in place, it is not set it and forget it, because a lot of external factors can impact that plan. Maybe inflation rears its ugly head. Maybe taxes change. Maybe whatever the case is. So you have to look at that plan every 6 to 12 months to make sure, okay, is everything the same? Do you need, what about the RMD? How about inflation? Let's make sure that plan, maybe the bones of it are still going to be there. It's not like if you need to make a slight change that it was a wrong plan. It just means we got to tweak it a little bit. So how often are you recommending to your clients to revisit that plan?
I mean, a plan is only as good as it's implemented, right?
Yeah.
You can have the best plan in the world. If it's not checked up on and implemented, it's not going to do that great, especially the one where you're actively moving money like that. So you want to be checking up on that thing minimum at least once a year. Okay. Should probably be doing it quarterly, but at least once a year, because like you said, life happens. Incomes change, expenses change. Maybe you need to pull out more money to live on in retirement. Well, that might mean you need to convert less because you don't want to jump your bracket up, right? There's all these components. And then, of course, we can throw the big catalyst in there, which is Washington, D.C., right? Because they control tax laws. So what if they change the brackets? Like, that's stuff that usually you need to work with somebody to stay up on top of, right? That's why we recommend plan it out and then update the plan each year to make sure it's still going according to plan. Right? It's great to have 100%. A beautiful plan up front. It might look good and feel good, but are you implementing it each year? Are we making sure it's going according to plan? Right? That's paramount. That's key.
Love it. So Oxford, you guys have made a name for yourself with Inc. 5000 in Florida, favorites and best wealth management firms. What are you guys doing differently? Because it sure sounds to me like you're taking that knowledge and you have the wisdom to turn it into those good plans for your clients. What are some of the principles that you're doing to serve your clients and that are different than other advisors?
I get asked that question a lot by clients and by people in the industry. It's hard for me to find an answer for a while because I don't know. We just kind of do what we do, right? But here, I kind of boiled it down to this: Chris and I are brothers. We're a family-based firm, right? And we truly feel like that our employees and our clients truly feel like family does. And as you know, you'll go above and beyond for a family member, especially one you like, right? Especially one you choose to work with, right? So we treat clients like family, and we're always trying to innovate. We're always trying to push and become better as a company and better for our client. And who wins in the end? Everybody wins. The client wins, so then my employees win. We all win, right? So we're a family-based firm, and we take that to heart. We've seen up close what happens to I have extended family members, so I've seen what happens when bad financial advice comes from somebody who shouldn't be giving it. I've seen firsthand the effects when I was a kid that had on people, right? So we take that personally, and we're all about educate, right? We're not the type of people to just tell you to do something. We're going to educate you on your options. We're going to have a recommendation in there. We're going to educate you to where really you're making your own informed decisions based on our guidance, our education. And I have people tell me all the time, like, Sam, like, I've been somewhere else for so long, and I've learned more in 5 meetings here at Oxford than I did in 20 years at the other place. And to me, I'm like, well, I don't know why. We just love education, right? I always kind of joke, I guess Chris and I kind of have the heart of a teacher, right? At the end of the day, like, want people to be informed on what they're in. And I think that stems from, that's how I am. If I go somewhere and somebody just tells me to do something, I'm like, why?
You push back.
You got to explain it to me a little bit. Like, yeah, I don't know how a car engine works, man, but you can explain why I need that part. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then I logically can follow what you're talking about, even though I'm not a mechanic and I can't fix it. But yeah, that makes sense. It's been said that people like to buy, but they don't like to be sold. And I love the heart of a teacher concept, because really in business today, content is king. You need to teach and educate and be that advocate for the success of your client. And sometimes that is at the expense of the firm. Maybe it's like, ooh, I could tell them to do this thing and it would benefit us, but in reality, this is better for them. I'm going to show them both, but let them make the choice. People want to understand.
That's a great point. And I try to stress that to our advisors. Like, first of all, we can't help everybody who comes in the door. We have a lot of people come through. We can't help everybody, but you can take time out of your day to educate them. And maybe that client's not a right fit for our firm. So what? If we're going to take the time to educate them, that could have a massive impact in their life. It can go out and change their life in a different way that we don't even know about. But I'm a firm believer, you do what's right, and it'll come back to you at some point. Does that mean it's going to come back to you with that client? Probably not. But a year or two from now, they talk to somebody. We've had that happen all the time, where we'll help somebody with some small little problem, and they're not the right fit for our firm, but we help them with something small and we educate them. Man, I've had them send me 2 or 3 people who are very good clients now, right? And that's a cool thing. The other cool thing is when we get client referrals from our clients, because that means a lot. That means they like what we're doing for them, right?
Yeah.
But it also means a lot because when that referral comes in, they've been pretty well educated by my client. That means that our education to our clients is going well, because they're able to then turn around and educate their friend a lot. And they sound like they work here sometimes. Right? I'm a little shocked. I mean, a lot. You sound like you work here, right? Because we've had that client for so long and educated them so well that they're able to then pass that education on to their friends. So it's a pretty cool chain of events to see, and just a reaction. I call it kind of, dropping a pebble in causes a ripple effect larger than I think we realize sometimes. And that's what I tell all of our employees here too. It's like, hey, you got to understand what business we're in. We're in the business of changing lives, right?
Yeah.
You got physical health and you got financial health and retirement. Those are 2 key components. I can't do anything with physical health. Me and biology didn't mix. Not a doctor, right? But the financial side, we can definitely help people out with that and enable them to go see their grandkids more. We can allow them a travel budget that allows them to go see their grandkids across the country, maybe that they didn't do before. You know what kind of impact that is? Like, that's a big deal. And
I know there's research out there to prove this, but when someone feels more comfortable about their retirement, their finances, they actually live longer because their heart rate slows, they're at peace, they're not worried about the markets because we put it in the right places. And so in a sense, that's where the money and the physical actually do overlap. And so that's a powerful point. So yeah, you need to do the right thing for people because it's the right thing. It can have that ripple effect. That's huge. And I think that that's something that a lot of times people just really don't pick up on. And real is rare. And these days, you hear about currency and Bitcoin and this and that. I will submit to you that the most important currency is trust and credibility. And when you have that, as evidenced by your clients sending you referrals that are already pre-educated, wow, that's showing you trust and credibility, and that's just powerful.
Yeah, I think we strive to be pretty blunt with people here. I'm a pretty blunt person, as you probably know, Mike. I've talked to you a couple of times. If it comes in my head, it's going to come out my mouth here. I don't put a whole lot of filter on there. My wife hates that in social settings, by the way. But it worked pretty great in business for me. So, but we wear our hearts on our sleeve. We want what's best for people, period. And we believe educate's the way to do that.
Yeah.
And plan is probably the thing I'd put into people's heads as well.
Well, Sam, this has been really powerful. If someone is listening and thinking, hey, how can I get that, insight, that wisdom, and get some education on what retirement or RMDs or things like that would look like for me, what's the best way they can learn a little bit more and reach out and connect with you guys?
Yeah, so oxfordadvisorgroup.com. Don't be shocked. You might see my face when it pops up on there. Sorry about that, right? When you Google that. But oxfordadvisorgroup.com. And there's even people that if you just want, hey, I don't want to come into the office. We got reports and stuff that we can actually send to you. You fill out a couple little pieces of information. We can run an RMD analysis report and actually send it to you and give you kind of an outlook on maybe if RMDs are even a problem for you. And we have other reports, Social Security tax reports, all these little reports that people worry about. And probably the coolest thing I hear from people is, Sam, I'm not sure if I can retire. I want to retire in 3 years. I'm just not sure if I can. That's my favorite plan to work on, because then I love being able to show people the peace of mind that, hey, in 3 years you're good. You can actually walk away next year if you really want to. Those people tend to like their jobs more when you can tell them they can really leave the next year. They don't even have to wait 3 years. Then they end up working 3 years because they enjoy the job, right?
Right.
So we run a whole bunch of reports and analytics on that stuff. So you can always reach out, oxfordadvisorgroup.com. We should have some links for some reports and on there as well.
Excellent. Well, Sam, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Have a good one.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.